Hello and welcome to Red Gaming Tech for your daily dose of your latest gaming news and myself, Amata. Today is the 7th of November and I have yet more news from the Xbox One as head of Microsoft Studios Phil Spencer recently addressed some issues for the X1 in an interview with Revision 3. Now the Xbox One has come under a bit of fire lately for some of its heavy hitters offering what some are regarding as suboptimal resolutions. Of course we have Ryse Son of Rome only offering a 900p and Call of Duty Ghosts going up to 720. Now in the interview Spencer did argue that it should be up to the creator where to make cuts to deliver the experience that they want to deliver. And he said, quote, "We could have done something which I would have said would be draconian and wrong, to go out and dictate that you must hit a certain frame rate or you must hit a certain resolution. We really want these decisions to be put in the hands of the creators and let them decide where they want to spend their resources on the hardware. I'll take Ryse as an example. We looked at Ryse at different resolution with different graphic techniques, and we made the decision along with Crytek that 900p 30fps with the techniques that we could employ around lighting, around anti-aliasing, the animation, for everything that we wanted to run, that was the right answer. I think it's the best looking launch game out there. If people want to get hung up on the numbers, they can do that, but really what they should be looking at is what's on screen, with the controller in their hands and playing the game. If they really care, they can go play Forza at 1080p 60fps, a beautiful game. But games should be defined by more than their frame rate and resolution. I think this is an industry about fun and people should pick the controller in their hand or gesture and play the games and decide what they like. I think that's the soul of what this industry is about." Now, while I agree with his sentiments that there are more to games than graphics, I've said this time and time again that what's really important in a game is aesthetic. Because, well, if we look back to, say, the PS1 era, the games of the time that were, the most graphically impressive at the time with the polygons and everything, they have not aged well, let's just be honest. They look pretty ugly by today's standards, but the ones that, say, used an interesting aesthetic, as in their own individual art style, perhaps didn't go for the most extreme graphics and dem polygons, though. They are the ones that have stood the test of time, and that's pretty much the case across the board. Where if you make your own spin on it, it just ages a lot better, and it really just has more personality to it. I'm not saying you can't have personality by having the most extreme graphics, of course you can, but what I'm saying is that texture quality is not as important as aesthetic. A good aesthetic is something you can achieve even with slightly limited graphics. Many indie games have shown us this, and you can have good graphics and have good aesthetic. I'm not saying they're mutually exclusive. I'm just saying that graphics and resolution aren't everything. However, there is good reason for the focus on resolution and frame rates. This is the next generation of consoles. Everyone is looking at both of the consoles, Xbox One and PS4, and looking at what they can do. They want to know how much of a leap forward have we actually got. Have we finally got 1080p at 60 frames per second like PC has had for years? Have we finally got X? Have we got this? Have we got that? I think it's more than fair for people to want to know what resolution and frame rate their next generation games are going to be running at. I think once the games actually come out, there'll be less focus on it because, well, the consoles actually be in people's hands, they'll be enjoying the games. However, into the run-up to the launch, we're focusing on the next generation and what it can actually bring to the gaming industry in terms of the changes, improvements, and so on. And since graphics are improved, but we can't really push too much further at the moment in terms of technology, everyone is looking at the frame rate and resolution because, well, that is somewhere where the current generation consoles have not exactly done well in comparison to PC. So I don't think it's really fair to say, oh, you shouldn't worry about the resolution. No, you kind of do. Although I think there's more to games than graphics and resolution and frame rate. I think it's more than understandable when we're coming up to next generation, when this generation has lasted such a long time, that we want to know what technological leap forwards have actually been made by both parties. However, moving on from that particular point, elsewhere in the interview, Spencer did also address concerns that the Kinect isn't adding much to most games beyond unnecessary, quote, gimmicky gesture or voice controls. Now, he did argue that it's necessary for developers to at least have the option for Kinect, and not including it in the console would split the market too drastically. And he did say, quote, It's something that's really important, putting a common tool in the hands of all the developers so I don't have to think about with a third of the install base. Do they have Kinect and the rest of them don't? How do I deal with that? Making that a common base part of the platform has been really instrumental in getting the devs to support Kinect in many ways. And then he continued by saying, gesture shows up in a ton of games, voice shows up in a ton of games. Obviously you can go to the extreme where games are exclusive to Kinect, like Kinect Sports Rivals, like Xbox Fitness, like Just Dance. You can get some games that are really just about playing with the Kinect sensor, but you're finding a lot of games in that space, which I call the hybrid space, that use the Kinect and the controller. It's just shown that when you put the tools in the hands of the creators, that they'll come up with some really interesting games that use the technology. Now, he was pressed for examples of games that actually used the Kinect to drastically enhance the gameplay experience, and Spencer argued that Kinect Sports Rivals and D4 came to his mind. Now, he did note that adding controller support to Kinect Sports Rivals, quote, would be like playing Dance Central with the controller. It just doesn't really make any sense. And when discussing D4, he said, quote, it's a great game to look at when you think about Kinect. The game was thought about from the beginning about how gesture could be used to actually control the experience. There was never really a thought about how we build a controller-based game. The spirit of the game from day one was about using gesture to really get you emotionally tied into the gameplay experience, and I think they've done a really great job with that. Now, whether or not Kinect actually adds anything to the experience is going to vary from person to person. With games like D4, of course, the Kinect is necessary for those games, but for the majority of games, they are probably not going to make use of the technology, and if they do, it will end up feeling a little shoehorned in. As we did kind of see, the Kinect 1 on the Xbox 360 hardly set the world on fire, and we didn't really see many games really making proper use of the technology. Now, the fact that it's being, of course, bundled with the console on release, we may see that change because, of course, the Kinect was an extra edition that was released later on down the line. That might have been one of the main reasons for the lack of support from the gaming community and, of course, developers. So now that we've got it bundled with the console, that you know every X1 owner has a Kinect sitting on their shelf, even if it is unplugged or what have you, that they can buy a Kinect game if they want because they already have the technology there, then yeah, we may see more of an uptake on it, but I don't know how many games are going to make proper use of it. That's the thing. There's only so many games that you can do it with. There's a lot of games that are just going to work better with the traditional control method, and you could argue the same for Kinect, I suppose. It really comes down to your personal preference as to whether you think Kinect adds anything to a game or not. Now, when you have the game focused around it, yeah, okay, it could add something, but if it's just sort of thrown in there, it's going to feel a bit weird, like some of the games on the Wii, where the waggle controls were just kind of thrown in because, oh, hell yeah, it's a Wii game, we've got to have those in there, and they felt a bit strange and out of place because of that. We could see a similar syndrome with the Kinect if we see a lot of games pushed for it, but it's tough to say. We won't actually know until the games and the consoles come out, which is not that far away now, only a couple of weeks to go. A little bit longer for those of us in the UK, but still. I would be curious to hear your thoughts on the points discussed here, though. Pretty much covering the ground we've already discussed, but I'm glad that someone has said that games aren't just about graphics, but I still think my point remains that it's perfectly natural for people to look at the improvements made for the next generation. Anyway, that is me done for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.